Welcome, travelers. I'm Josh.
And I'm Lewanika, and this is Tabletop Journeys, where we will be your not-so-humble guides on the quest for RPG adventures.
Welcome to tonight's episode of Tabletop Journeys. Joined, as always, first of all, I'm Josh. Hello, everybody. Joined, as always, on the other side of the microphone, all the way from Kentucky, Mr. Michael Ross, all the way from Connecticut, Mr. Lewanika Miller. Gentlemen, how the hell are you?
Well, it's hot here. I spent a little while out at the pool.
Yeah. It's I was saying this pre-show too, like it has to be really, really hot for me to get like in water. Like that is not my favorite state of being. And for the, in Maine, we'll get like 1 or 2 days a year that are over 100 degrees. And today was one of them. So tomorrow it's going to be down to 87 again. And then on Saturday, it's going to be down into the 60s again. It's unbelievable what's going on up here right now. So, but
yeah, it was extremely hot down here in Connecticut. 102 when my wife said, I'm done with this working thing, and called it. Oddly, my house stays very cool. My office tends to stay very cool until I open it up in the evening when I go out and do my errands and come back for recording. So it's warm right now. It is warmer right now than it has been all day. I actually was cold at a certain part during the day and actually had to shut my AC off because it was so chilly in the office.
Yeah.
And I like bragging about that. Many of my friends have been very angry at me for the humble brag.
I always wear a sweater in this room because I get cold, but I'm actually going to have to disrobe it because it's a little warm. Yeah. No one wants to see that.
Take it off. Take it off.
So we were talking about skill challenges.
Yeah. Skill challenge. Looks like Michael just got one success on his charisma check. Well, actually, we hadn't said what we were talking about tonight, but as you can see on the bottom part of the screen here, tonight we're going to be talking about skills challenges. Skills challenges are one of those things that kind of pops up every so often in discussions throughout kind of the D&D ethos. They were originally a D&D 4th edition thing, if I remember correctly. So they're relatively
That's where I first encountered them. It's entirely possible that it was in another system first, but that's where I learned about them.
I think we've all kind of encountered them in different varieties. I really only encountered them when I started playing 5th edition again because I didn't play 4th edition. So, but Michael, since this was your topic, I'm going to go ahead and toss it over to you. What the heck's a skill challenge and why are we talking about it?
So I love skill challenges.
That's why we're talking about it. Yeah.
When we got to 4th edition, which again is not nearly as bad as a lot of people say, it was poorly marketed. If they didn't say D&D, they said, here's a skirmish minis game, people would have loved it, in my opinion. But skill challenges was something that was in the player's handbook or the DMG, basically explain how it works. And essentially the idea is anytime your players as a party need to overcome a certain obstacle where everyone has to participate, but they can kind of choose how they want to participate. And if you get a certain number of successes before a certain number of failures, you are assumed to have been successful. It works very well for like montage sequences. You can think of it as sort of cinematic. You can even do a battle as a skill challenge. In fact, if you listen to our most recent class warfare, that absolutely was a skill challenge, the way I handled the bards.
Absolutely. Yep.
One thing I find personally funny is if you've ever played Forged in the Dark, Blades in the Dark, clocks, they're just skill challenges. That is 100% all they are.
Yeah.
They're just represented with circles rather than lines. It's like you need this many successes before this many failures, or if you get this many failures as you sneak through the castle, it creates like the guards attack you. 100%. That is exactly a skill challenge.
It also, first of all, fantastic rundown. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that because not only was there a skill challenge in the Bard class warfare, the one and what I'm going to be talking about a lot tonight is the one that we did for the Druid class warfare. Also started with the skill challenge, and the reason why we're going to be talking about it is because I'm cracking that nut open again for my home table tomorrow, and I want to go ahead and talk through some aspects of it. That's why I scheduled tonight's recording for tonight, actually. In fact, so. Thing one. But thing two, that's a really interesting observation. I never thought about that with the clock system. The other thing that it makes me think of, like now that I think about it, is that in the the book of heists that came out a couple of years ago, quests from the
Golden Key,
the
Vault?
Golden Key, the Golden Vault, quest from the Golden Vault, I think, whatever it was. One of those missions, there was a mission that happened in this very famous prison that's up in Faerun, in the Forgotten Realms. And there's a whole like alarm system with the guards. It's really just a prolonged skills challenge, because the way that the guards kind of begin to suspect you or not is if you fail on enough things, i.e. you get enough failures on your skill challenge, right?
Yep.
Then they begin to suspect what's going on. However, you can circumvent that by doing certain things and succeeding in certain things, i.e. succeeding on your skills challenge. And I had not pieced that together until you said that about the clocks. I was like, oh, that's what's going on with the stress system in that mission too, written by a friend of the show, Sadie Lowry, no less.
I think a lot of people use versions of skill challenges, but don't think of it in that terminology.
Sure.
Anytime you're doing a heist, anytime you're trying to break in and they're like, hey, are their guards going to catch you? Well, it depends on either you fail so many skill checks, or sometimes it could be a severity. Like if you fail a stealth check by 2 or 3, you alert the closest guard. If you absolutely crush it, or, whatever the opposite of crush is, you fail it terribly, it's you get a 1, then maybe it alerts the entire courtyard. So you can have severity levels of skill challenges, but you can also just have number of success to failure. Again, going back to 4th edition, for anyone who has read it, I think they are a brilliant concept, but the 4th edition executed them terribly. And I think that's one reason why they didn't quite catch on, is I just don't think the book does a good job of explaining how to do them. And even some of the examples they use aren't great. So they don't feel fun, but I would argue that they can actually be a ton of fun. I, again, go back and watch that Class Warfare for Bards. That is a modified skill challenge where you had to have a certain number of successes, 4, before you had a certain number of failures, 4, because it was best out of 7. And you were allowed to use skills or combat. And that's kind of the big variation there, is that you could do an attack, you could do a spell, or you could do a skill, and they all mechanically worked the same way in that scenario. Where in most of the time, skill challenges are not combat oriented, but there is nothing stopping you from doing that.
One other quick aside, Lewanika, before you jump in, extended challenges in STA, also skills challenges.
Okay. I need you to not read
you just
my card.
Sniped that right out of Lewanika's hand.
I did. Snagged it right. He was just about to say it. I was like, no, you don't talk. I talk now. I'm the captain.
Who's the captain now? Picard.
I'm the captain now. So carrying on the early part of this conversation, talking about skills challenges, I've loved them. And I think Michael has touched on a very salient point, that skill challenges, while they have not always been named as such, and they may not have had a unified format as they eventually got in 4th edition, have probably been around for quite a while in one shape, form, or another. Usually my guess is they turned up in an adventure module that did one scene a certain way or another scene a certain way. What 4th edition did was formalize the process and basically release to storytellers, GMs, and DMs, you can put any scenario on this. You can put this scenario, this mechanic, on any canvas to achieve your goal. And I think that's what happened in 4th edition. I think the challenges with the 4th edition skill challenges and their lack of popularity had more to do with the game and the marketing of the game than the actual system itself. The fact that it is so continually spoken about, it is so continually used, it is such a part of many game systems at this point. One could even theorize Powered by the Apocalypse, in the way that they do things that are not as quote unquote mechanical, are all skill challenges. Like that, the whole gameplay loop is skill challenges to achieve the ends of a given scene. One could make that argument, I think, and you'd probably have me reasonably convinced. And again, as with anything we're talking about, the core mechanic has variances depending on the game world you're playing, the game system you're playing, and the people at your table. As Star Trek Adventures, their extended challenge system is a skill challenge, period, full stop. That's not even debatable to me. That is a fact. That is exactly what it is. And the way they do it specifically in 2E, far better than 1E, mind you, is really illuminating to me and has helped me do it better in D&D and understand it better in D&D because I see it in a very narrative game. So now when I do that in D&D and other more mechanical games, it's because I don't want to waste time doing the mechanics. I want this bit to be narrative and descriptive, not mechanical. So I do skill challenges when the goal is the cool factor and the narrative factor, not the bish bash bosh mechanical turning of this or that. And as importantly, when it is everybody in the group doing it versus individual or maybe a couple individuals.
Sure.
Yeah, there's a couple points I want to jump in there. So a couple of the classic scenarios that I think skill challenges could be used for, but if not done well, could fall flat, is your typical murder mystery where you have to find clues and eliminate suspects, and your maybe white whale, sort of like the trial scene. You're in a courtroom, and either the players, what characters are on trial, or they're there to help the defense, or whatever the case may be. Both of those often are most successful when they are role play first, where you just let the characters role play their characters and kind of let their role play guide where you go. What skill challenges do for you in both of those situations, though, is it kind of levels the playing field so that you don't just have the one charismatic character doing it all. Yeah. Your awkward, stumbly, bumbly mage also has to find a way to contribute. Your barbarian, can I hit it now, has to find a way to contribute to that so that it's a party effort, it's a team effort. And it does require some gamification. And it does. And for me, I will just say, we are doing this as a skill challenge. No. Everybody has to go. Each of you can participate however you want or whatever skill you want. If I'm going to let you use spells or combat, I'll lay that out. But everyone has to find a way to participate. We'll go around the room, and then I will reset the terms. Like once everyone's gone through, okay, you had more successes than failures. You are swaying the jury. Okay, but we need to start over again. You're not quite there. Who has an interesting way of affecting it? And to me, that is one of the key elements where, again, it gets away from just the bard doing it or the sorcerer doing it. Because if you can say, well, my wizard actually had to, I was pre-law before I went into wizardry school, and you can tell me a little funny story, I might lower your DC. Yeah. So that you actually are better able to help the scene progress than the just charismatic, very, persuasive or intimidating bard. And that's how I can draw these other characters who don't usually get to be the face, get a little story time. Tell me why you are able to participate using this obscure skill that doesn't really seem to fit the what we're doing here. I'm going to make it easier for you to do that rather than harder.
Yep. I love that.
Absolutely.
So Michael, for you said basically you launch in by just saying, we're going to do a skills challenge to go ahead and adjudicate this. And I think that's kind of the best thing that the skill challenge framework does, is it provides a way to adjudicate RP heavy scenes, right? You're talking about the trial scene, right? Where it's like, you can have all the charismatic players at your table that you want, but the fact of the matter is that they are playing characters, and they either the players are or are not charismatic at that level too, right? Like, who knows? Right. I mean, maybe they're shy, maybe they don't want to be the one talking, maybe who knows, right? There's any number of things, but it still gives a kind of level system to adjudicate what's going on and how the flow of that thing is going. Maybe the super charismatic rogue, fumbles on the roll, and so it's like, oh, people kind of see through that charisma, and they're not actually buying what he's saying, kind of thing. So that's kind of the best thing that a skill challenge does. It provides that framework for adjudication.
For the courtroom specifically, I would give this advice: is set it up kind of like a Perry Mason scene, if anyone's old enough to remember the old actual original Perry Mason. Yep. And you can do it like as in flashbacks.
Yep.
So your team is like the investigative side for the defense, who doesn't have any money. The prosecution is funded by the crown. They're trying to hose this person that's on trial for something they didn't commit. And so your wizard does a flashback to they spent hours in the library researching precedent. And then the defense attorney, who's probably your charismatic rogue, is the one who gets to present that to the court. So they get to role play and be their charismatic self, but it's basically funded, or it's like formatted by, or it's in, there's a word I'm looking for there, prefaced by the wizard doing the investigation. It's by the fighter hanging out with the guards and drinking beers and finding out, oh, actually they didn't find the murder weapon originally. They found it 2 days later in a locker. Like, so you have all these like flashback story times, but then you, in between each, you go to the current day trial. And I think that can handle that type of scene beautifully, where I have failed many times to try to do that well. Skill challenges to me are the best way to handle that.
So
I think you're absolutely right. And it makes me think of leverage, because I really think when you're doing that, you've got your grifter in the possibly in the jury box. You've got your charismatic rogue doing the defense attorney bit. As you said, the fighter's doing the thing. The barbarian, by the way, they went out and caught the one-armed man, and they dragged him into court in the last minute. So they
surprise witness, Your Honor.
Bruno, bring him in, and then all of a sudden the one-armed man is there, and they're like, "Oh, Dr. Kimball is okay." We're gonna do another throwback to an old show.
Man, we old.
We real old. Mad love to Andreas Katsulas for his role in the Harrison Ford version, also as the one-armed man. But I think you're absolutely correct, and I'd never thought about doing it in flashback. And I have done skill challenges in courtrooms. And honestly, what I did was I had the party all on the witness stand. So each of them did their skill challenge about what they were doing on the witness stand versus doing it leading up to the defense. And I think that's another really interesting way to do that. And I really love hearing that. One thing that I had a question, and I just want to throw it out to all of you. I tend to run larger parties, and the one difficulty I've found with skill challenges, especially if you use the standard 5x4 or 7x5 or whatever the number is that you use, 7x4 or whatever, when you have a very large party, it is really easy for them to get it right off the rip. Which is one of the things that STA gets around, because it allows you to pick the total number of successes that need to be done, right? The total number of work or whatever. So I have had challenges with picking the right magic number based on my table size. So I'm interested in your thoughts on what you think works. I think the standard works perfect if you have 4 or 5. I think the standard does not work well when you have 6. It certainly doesn't work well when you have 7 or 8. And I tend to do 6 through 8 at my tables usually. So the one thing I struggle with skill challenges is finding that sweet spot that works for the group.
Well, Josh has been trying to jump in, so I'm
no, it's fine, because I think I'm going to steal your thunder here, Michael, because I stole Lewanika's earlier. If you think about the way that Michael ran the Bard scenario, that's where your answer is. The answer is that one person per round rolls for the work, for lack of a better phrase, right? Everybody else that did anything in that round contributed to the difficulty check, to the difficulty challenge.
And that's a modified way to do skill challenges. That is not standard, but I think that works for that type of party.
Right. Okay. So if you've got 8, right? So you're starting at like a DC of 20, for example, right? If 7 of those people succeed, then the DC is only 13 when one of them needs to roll to see if they get a success.
Gotcha.
Right. I thought that was a brilliant way to go ahead and handle that with a big party and with a big, that way everybody went also. So it wasn't like, because in that scenario there, it would have been really easy. There were 4 of us. If we only needed 4 victories, like that would have been super easy. But to string it out a little bit.
It was basically 4 rounds, no matter what. That was a 4-round event, regardless.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah. And again, I credit Rich Howard. I completely stole that encounter concept from him. The skill challenge thing, but the lowering the DCs was straight from a game I played with him recently.
Yeah. That was a great way to go ahead and so thank you very much, Rich, because that really really worked, to the point that I have retooled the one that I'm going to be doing tomorrow night with that in mind, because I had this, because I played with 6, right? And so I was thinking the same thing. I was like, man, if it's only going to be like a 4 challenge thing, like they may not even make it through a full round of people. And I've got so many new players at the table that I want everyone to go ahead and do it. So I'm going to go ahead. I want to go ahead and do it round style, and figure out. I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to decide who gets to roll just yet, but we'll figure that out. I don't know. I'll figure something out on the fly. But really. So sorry if I stole your thunder there, Mike. I wasn't sure if there's anything that you wanted to add on that, or if that was pretty much that.
So the only thing the two things I would add is, one is I always let everyone go at least once, even if we get there ahead of time. I'm like, everyone's gonna get to participate at least once. If you've already solved it, then you can just narrate yours, or we can roll it, because I want everybody to participate. I don't normally play for 8, so that is not anything I'm ever going to run into. So I can hypothesize and extrapolate, but I cannot say to do this or do that, because I rarely play with more than 4, because 3 is actually my preferred player size. When GM, 3 players is my perfect number. But one other way that I run skill challenges, which is again slightly modified, I don't know if it would actually help for 8 people, but I'll just throw out the way I do it. Again, maybe you can play around with it or think through it. I don't always do number of success to number of failures. I treat the challenge like it has hit points. And the number you get above the DC is how many hit points you take away. So I may set the DC. So the hit points of the challenge is 50. First placing person goes, they're a rogue, so they're trying to be really sneaky. They crush it. They get a 22 over the 15. That's 7. That's 7 hit points off the 50. And then I'll go around, and it may take more than one cycle around. But then if someone does a really poor job, I can actually add hit points back to it. It's all very narrative and cinematic. I got to figure out like what that failure means and how it makes it overall more difficult. But I have found that to be a very fun way to do it as well. And I just will be very generous on the DCs. Again, if someone's doing something very interesting, like they're using intelligence, or I think the one I used was a charisma. They were trying to navigate through a swamp. And the bard is like, well, one of the songs that I learned in bard school was about this swamp. And in that story, Johnny Appleseed, and they made up some reason why they knew a song that kind of was about the swamp. I was like, sure, that's DC 12. And they got a 20 on their check. So that's 8 hit points off the skill challenge total.
How do you handle the failure condition in that situation then? So if it's only a hit point and it's kind of tricking down, how do they fail it?
So I would the song was completely made up. The person didn't actually go through the swamp, and so it was like apocryphal, and so they actually went the wrong way, and I would add hit points back and go, oh, you fell by 5. This is now someone else has to compensate. Or I might give the next person a higher DC. Like your DC would have been 14, but because you are so far off the beaten path now, it's going to be 16 for this check.
Sure. So, sorry.
Which can get into a death spiral if you're not careful, and then it's fail.
Right, yeah, because that's more where I was going with that, is not failing on an individual check in the skills challenge, but failing the skill challenge overall. Like, how does...
Yeah, that's the thing. You can't, in my mind, you can't do a skill challenge if failure is not an option. You have to have a fail scenario where the game continues. And it's like, oh, you're all dead, or you're all in prison.
Right.
And prison could work, because then you could be like, now it's time for the prison break. Yeah. But you have to have some way that the game continues even if you fail, or skill challenges, which I would say that really is any pivot point in the story. You need to be able to deal with failure or don't do it.
Yeah, but almost more than combat, I think skills challenge really have to have an exit path. I guess, sorry, and I'm not trying to be obtuse. I mean, like specifically mechanically with the hit point model, how do, if the hit points are kind of continually going down as I'm succeeding and maybe going back up as I fail, how do we as a party fail that skill check? What is there a threshold that says?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Probably you would have to have a set number of attempts. Like everyone goes around 3 times. If you have not got there, then it's a failure. Because again, just if it starts to not be fun, like if everyone's still enjoying it, because I may not tell them that it's 3 times around, but I probably will. Essentially, if it stops being fun trying, they'll fail. And as long as we're making progress and everybody's having a good time, I'll let them keep going.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, because I may actually change my mind now. I mean, instead of going with the with the retired method, I may do the hip hop method.
Yeah, I like that for specific types of scenarios. I know one of the things we talked about pre-show is talking about different scenarios where we think skill challenges would really shine. And I think the 2 things that you've posited as far as variations on a traditional skill challenge might work best in 2 different scenarios. So that hit point one may work in one thing. And I'm thinking of like a large scale. Like a large scale rescue. Like you have to save the village from issue X, right? You know, Watsy liked to talk about what happens when the Tarrasque comes to town. Well, instead of having a slog that lasts for 3 different sessions and 80 jillion rounds where your party of whatever level is facing the Tarrasque, how about their challenges evacuating the city, right? And then that has a hit points. And then you determine the total number of rounds that you're going to be able to do. And that probably would be based on you know, the number of players you have, where their tier is, how likely, how high they are to be over whatever the average DC would be. You'd have to do that kind of prep work and math up front.
Yeah.
I would call Josh and say, Josh, help me with this math.
Just mean that I really like that as a concept for that particular scenario, because then you don't have a win or loss. You just have a, how does it wash out? Like you said, at 50 hit points, every 5 hit points is a victim, and they get through 40.
Right.
2 villagers died, or 2 civilians, you know, like you could work that math out where there probably is never going to be a, you get everybody, because that's not the scenario. So I think that's real. I think you have to figure out the math, which again, I'm not good at. I'll call Josh as well. But as a concept, I think that is a really good way to use that particular version.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't kind of cut you off.
No,
no, perfect. Yeah. I think that's the key with skill challenge. There's so many different ways to vary this great concept. You have to find the one that works best for the scenario you're trying to deal with or work through with your party. That's going to be the most fun. Give the players the most amount of creative space to enjoy, have fun, and impact the story positively or negatively. And then that scenario that you do whatever the mechanics are, you do that for that scenario. Josh, you mentioned street chases. I've done more of a traditional skill challenge for street chases. I like what Michael did in the Bard game. Now that I, from behind the screen, understand it more. Like when I play, I am so in the moment. If I get into GM headspace, like, ooh, I want to understand what's going on here while I'm playing, I stop playing and I stop having fun in that way. And I just start having fun in dissecting the way the system works and doing all that. So especially when we're on air doing actual play stuff, if I'm playing, I shut that part of my brain off on purpose and I just play the player and do that. And then afterwards I will kick back and say, wow, that was cool. How the heck did we do that? When Michael mentioned we were going to do this episode, I'm like, I'm not going to ask him because I'm going to ask him on air. And now I truly understand it. I'm like, perfect. So I would use that for the chase sequence setup and all of its variations, because now everybody does their thing. One person rolls. Have you gained on the query, or have you lost ground on the query? In 4 rounds, you've cleared the map or you've cleared the area, whatever. Either the bad guy gets away or the bad guy gets caught in 4 rounds. That's it. That's, and I think that works really well. So you basically, whatever worked, the best number of successes. And I think that's a brilliant way to do that kind of scenario.
So I will say that I had forgotten that at my home game, I had already done a skill challenge because it was a long time ago. But basically, the party had split and half the party was trying to steal something from a house and wound up getting chased out of the house by the owner of that house's prized mastiffs, right? And so they were getting basically chased through the streets by these dogs. And I will never forget that my cleric, my grave cleric, is like, when he realized that the skill challenge was not going well, right? He's like, so I want to ready a spell. And I want to ready my action, and the trigger for me casting it is going to be if we fail the skill challenge. And I'm like, sure, whatever, we can go ahead and do that. How the dogs are getting closer. What's going to happen. Blah blah blah, right? And so sure enough, they like duck down a corner. He fails his stealth check because he's rolling at disadvantage because he's readying a spell and blah blah blah, which is all part of what he wanted. He's like, I feel like I need the dogs here and I need them to present me to go ahead and do what I want to do. And I think I can get us out of this, because he had readied sleep. And so as soon as, the dogs round the corner and they're snarling and they're going to get him and everything like that, he triggers his spell, he casts sleep and knocks them all out. And I was like, well, sure. I mean, that's that's one way to do it, I suppose. Like,
Yeah.
that's, yeah, you know, that's if you're going to do that, you know, but then that caused complications because now the dogs know them, right? So it's like they didn't get out scot-free from it. They escaped with their lives, but they did not get, you know, and so that caused complications down the road when the dogs recognize them again and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, I had forgotten that I had done that until we mentioned the chase sequence there too.
Yeah, I think
So,
you have to honor the narrative there, and
yeah.
like that's just gonna be an in the moment because
Yeah.
like you want the skill challenge to be fun, and that is kind of like circumventing it. But I do the same thing with combat. It's like I set up, I think, as a cool combat, and the player's like, oh, because I have this spell or this skill, we actually don't have to do this combat. And you can either be like, no, it didn't work because you want to fight, or you can be like, yeah,
Right.
super cool.
Yeah, super cool.
Throw that over your shoulder.
Yeah.
Like, I guess I'll use that combat next week.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm fully a rule of cool DM, like absolutely, yeah. You know, and it was like, and again, you know, failing the skill challenge in air quotes still had ramifications, even if it wasn't that they got torn to shreds in the alleyway, you know, kind of thing. So it's,
You know, with my deep dives into various animals, you know, I listen to Odd Danny or whatever, and I'm constantly sending Josh, this is a cool thing, animal fact or whatever, all day long.
so many
So
animal
many.
facts.
Yeah.
I can't even
all
count
I
them.
was
I'm
sa-
the math guy.
Yeah, right. All I was thinking about when you mentioned the dog scenarios, let's go to the frozen north and do that with polar bears. Because one of the things that polar bears are
Jeez.
well known for in Alaska is polar bears can recognize specific scents of specific people.
Yeah.
So if you did the skill challenge, if that was done with polar bears as opposed to dogs, right?
Yep.
And then that they won that. The challenge is a polar bear can know a specific scent for the entirety of its life. So the next time that polar bear is within like 1 to 2 miles of that individual, they will then begin hunting them. So they won that scenario. Now they're getting tagged by a polar bear.
Okay.
Like a year later.
Ugh.
So I think
that's the kind of thing where you have honored what took place in that scene.
Yeah.
But the narrative weight of what you were dealing with, you didn't really win. You just got out of it. You're fighting that fight later.
But I think this is a good point to talk about. A couple things is generally when I do a skill challenge, I say we're doing a skill challenge.
Yep.
Now I have in my past and even still now, sometimes I will try to sort of disguise things because I think at the table it can feel a little more immersive if it is organic.
Yep.
But generally speaking, I have found a lot more success if I just say, you're in a skill challenge. This is how it works. Because people, when they actually know what's happening, they can make better choices. So if you're doing one where it's just above board, we're doing a skill challenge, everybody's got to participate. You got to have 5 successes before you have 3 failures. You can build as a party where maybe the ranger goes last and, hey, let me go last. Because if I can be the final success, maybe I can tame the polar bear or I can befriend it at least enough so that it doesn't want to murder us, or I can befriend the dogs so that, you know, and then the narrative way goes, okay, it works. You know, ranger, you only need 1 more success. And they succeed, they can then set the stakes and say, okay, I have befriended the dog. So they won't actually turn on us later. And I would then honor that as well. Or same thing with the polar bear. You know, like I scare it off as the barbarian with an intimidation check. That polar bear is not effing with the party anymore because the narrative states that it ran away from the barbarian when the skill challenge was won. So I think there is something to be said for just saying you're in a skill challenge and letting folks know that that's an option. If you can navigate it where it works out that way, 100%. But if you do that and then that happens to be one of your failures, even if it's not the final failure, the next check is going to be harder. Because you tried to befriend it or tried to intimidate it, it didn't work. So the next person's skill check is going to be a little bit more difficult because it's still narrative weaving into the mechanics.
That was actually going to be the question that I was trying to tag in on like 15 minutes ago is what's the best way to kind of like begin a skills challenge? And you found from your experience, because I've done it both ways. I've also tried to kind of be cute about it. Maybe not so much with like D&D skills challenges, but certainly with like smaller extended or gated challenges in STA. I've done it that way where they may not know that they're in an extended challenge, but they are. You know, we're just kind of like playing through the narrative and I'm keeping track of how things are working on the backside, you know? But from your experience, it's really just like rip the Band-Aid off, say, we're in a skills challenge. Here's how it's going to work. Everyone's going to go around and you're going to succeed or fail as a team in a round. And then as it goes on, We'll kind of fill in the narrative
kind of
gaps.
update. Usually like after everybody is gone, then I'll kind of restate like you are getting close to being successful, or you're only halfway through, or you've actually done poorly. Now I've never ran STA. I ran it one time from the starter set years ago. And again, I think that was my first 2D20 game. So I didn't run it very well. Where that seems to be almost like a core mechanic part of STA, you might be able to do it more organically. And the player's kind of like, oh, this is what we're doing without saying it. But I don't think skill challenge, even 5th edition, that is not a core concept. So I think it would be better to just say, this is what we're doing. And then I want to touch on, one other way that I think you could do a combat version is like the Shadow of Colossus style. There's like a giant construct that everyone's attacking. The goal is not necessarily to defeat it, but it's like walking towards a village, and you've got to make sure it doesn't stomp on everybody. So things like, I'm going to use my engineering to see if I can figure out where this construct, if it is like a construct, is held together. I'm going to use my magic to try to like weaken the runes that are holding it together. I'm just going to hit it in the knee with my hammer. Like you can mix skill and combat in like a very cinematic, gigantic construct type battle.
So do you think when you're weaving combat or attacks, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, into a skills challenge, normally skills have a DC, so that just becomes the DC on the attack? Like you're obviously not chasing like an armor class or anything like that, but kind of regardless of what the attack is doing, the AC, the DC rather stays the same?
Well, it kind of depends. I think in the past, what I've done has been more, you're going to hit because you're hitting a giant construct. So it's how much damage. So you're going to roll for damage, and like the damage might be, oh, you did 15 damage. That's like hitting a DC 12. So it would be 3 hit points above on my hit point threshold. Again, I kind of have to play it by ear, but in the time where I did like it was a construct that was like very monstrous and kind of put together oddly, because I knew they was going to do it as a skill challenge, so I wanted to give them like avenues to attack. I did it more like just roll your damage, and the more damage you do, the better it helps.
When we're talking about getting it started, when we were sitting down and I was doing notes and preparing for tonight, I thought about what are some of the ways I could kind of weave in a skills challenge and kind of not say it, so it feels less gamified but works mechanically the same way. So I'm getting the benefit of the narrative and the benefit of the mechanics, so I'm balancing that player skill versus character skill issue without letting them know that I'm doing that specifically. And every time I've ever thought I was going to do it that way, if I didn't say it as we got to round one, as we started round one, before we got through the last player in that round, I ended up saying, by the way, this is actually a skill challenge.
Yeah, they did.
And part of that is, if I recall the original by the book rules for skill challenges, nobody could use the same skill twice in a row.
That's correct.
Right. And so what I found is, if I didn't tell them that, they were going to do that. And just by telling them that, I got more creative play. So I have just naturally found that to be the case. Somebody in the comments or on our various channels seeing this episode, if you've been in a scenario where you got it to work without telegraphing that, please tell us, because I do believe there is probably a scenario where that is true. I just haven't come across it yet. So if you can educate us, I'd be grateful. That way, the next time I come across that situation, I'm ready to rock. So I would appreciate that. But I have just not found, very similar to what Michael has said and what Josh has indicated, that anything shy of saying, hey, we're about to do a skill challenge makes the most sense. And I think look, we're playing a game. We're throwing dice to have probabilities. We're already gamifying everything. So it doesn't hurt to just say, this is why we're gamifying this piece.
Yeah. I think it could actually help, though. And I think that's, again, I have to get through that myself, because I want to be that organic GM where everybody's like so invested that, it happens. But one of my favorite con games ever is Dread. Absolutely love Dread. And the reason Dread works so well, in case anybody doesn't know, you play Jenga for Dread. You get to see the tower. You get to see how wonky or how stable or how sturdy it is. And so that adds to the element of how your character feels. If it's really wonky, your character feels dread, knowing they may have to make a pull because that could be the last pull. And I kind of reverse engineer that from Blades in the Dark, which again, it gives me a chuckle every time I hear someone talk about how innovative that clock system is. I'm like, no, it's just skill challenges. But part of the reason why it works is because you see the clock and you can see when things are going bad, and it kind of like, oh, things are going bad. I have to be very careful, and it can instill a sense of dread in your player and character because they see how tedious or tenuous the circumstance is. Or if it's going really well, someone can be like, hey, I got this crazy idea. I wouldn't do this if we were about to fail, but because we're doing well, let me try the skill I'm worst at. And I think it can make the table more fun with it being visible rather than hidden. So I actually think it kind of counterintuitively helps the atmosphere when it's front facing versus you trying to hide it, and it probably ain't gonna work anyways.
And I 100% agree with you. That's why meta currencies work best when they're on the table. We do it with STA, with Star Trek, when we're talking about momentum and threat. I always play with my threat on the table. I want people to see that. I want them to know this situation is getting tense. I want the players to feel the danger music building.
There's nothing more rewarding
I want them to hear that
than running STA and having your players talk and then just take threat off the table because you're spending it, but not tell them why explicitly, and having them be like, wait, why did you just take threat off? I'm like, oh, because I just spent some. What'd you spend it on? You'll find out. That's how you don't know yet. You just know that it's been spent. Like there is nothing more rewarding than that palpable fear. And I will say too, that part of what I'm going to be doing with the skill challenge that I'm running tomorrow night, I don't have to worry about people listening to this because by this point it has already happened, is that, if you listen to the Druid episode, basically you're on a boat and you're going to an island and the island starts spewing this poisonous gas at you, right? And the skill challenge basically is avoiding the poisonous gas, because if you don't avoid the poisonous gas, then when your boat lands, you do the rest of the adventure at one level of exhaustion, right? So not a huge downside, but not insignificant also, right? The magic of the way that I'm doing it is I have like 24 foggy ocean tiles that I'm going to be placing on the board every time they fail. So there's no set number of failures that they need to get. If the fog reaches the boat, they fail. So that might be 3 tiles. Like if they don't pilot the boat well, right, to go ahead and get where they need to go, or they don't kind of follow the trends, or if they just if they draw badly, because the tile's going to be randomly drawn too. So like they may just draw badly. Like that's, any number of things that could happen. But if the poison reaches the boat, they fail. If the boat goes around the poison and is able to get to the land, they succeed. Like that's very much, it's very nuts and bolts about it. So there's kind of like, so I've got the skill challenge kind of framework, but I've also got this kind of gamified aspect to it where I don't know how it's going to wind up because I don't know the shape the poison's going to take. So, I can't really plan on it. It's really just going to be a matter of how well do they do and how well what sort of choices do they make in terms of like, how do they get around it? So, and I'll be explicit about that. Like you don't want the poison to reach the boat kind of thing. It's like I'll be very explicit that that's the condition. That's the thing you are trying to avoid. All of your skills should go, all your roles should go towards that desired outcome. That is the desired outcome, is not getting hit by the poison cloud. So
that's interesting. Again, with the level exhaustion being mechanically significant, but not like, well, you lose. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I would like, maybe if you want, once you do that, maybe do like a quick, just jump on and go, here's how it went, and like add it to this episode.
Absolutely.
With any like positives or negatives outcomes kind of a thing.
I could totally do like a Dr. Homebrew episode after I'm done here and go ahead and talk through the outcome of how the skill challenge went. I think I would love
positive, negative, do different, lesson learned type of thing.
Exactly. Is my idea just cockamamie and wrong, and not it is not going to go well?
Because it could be, again, that's something, I think we've all talked about here and in other places as long-term podcasters. We do not have all the answers. We have educated opinions. And so sometimes we try things because we are experienced stuff. Like, I think I could work myself out of trouble if I try this thing I'm thinking of. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong, but we're always trying to do things differently and learn from them. And sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't, but we're always trying to learn. So I think that would be valuable.
I think so too.
And I think stretching out and reaching for the ring you have not yet reached before is important. And if you're not trying to reach for that next ring or do that next thing differently, better, with more flourish, with more determination, with more gusto, with more purpose than you've done it in the past, that's when you might as well be playing Monopoly, right? Because we could all throw 2d6 and circle the board and hope we land on Park Place. And don't get me wrong, I love Monopoly. I still have fun. Nobody in my family ever plays Monopoly with me.
Monopoly's a
ever
terrible
again.
game, and
They
you're a
will
terrible
not.
person.
Yeah.
Yes,
that's true.
Sorry.
But what's important to note is, as much as I enjoy that, I don't get the same kind of enjoyment as I do out of playing a TTRPG, right? And part of that is I'm never satisfied with the game I ran the last time. I always want to do something slightly different, bring in a new element, bring in a new story type of thing, try a different type of character, a different type of NPC, and I'm always reaching. And I think it's important to do that. And sometimes I don't make it. Sometimes I'm reaching and have a concept that is too long for a single 2-session or 2-episode podcast scenario. That has happened, right?
Yeah,
because I reach, and it doesn't mean that it was wrong to reach. What it means is I need to learn from that lesson, and what can I do the next time I want to do that? Okay, so maybe that one's a full campaign, maybe that one is not.
Yeah.
Right, but this is a safe space when we do this, and class warfare is a safe space to try things. But I think all of us, again, I don't run a campaign for the same 4 people. Like I run con games. Like most of the time I run are one shots of new systems. So I'm always trying to innovate and learn because I want that to be the best game I run for that particular table. I think that I could probably run a pretty fun campaign for the same 4 people that without ever learning anything new, but then I'm going to get bored. Because the forever GM in me is going to be like, well, I want to try things different because I want the game to be fun for me too. And that's where these ideas and these concepts and these, experiments bear fruit. And hopefully listening to this, someone out there will take something we've said tonight and make their game better for one session, if not one campaign.
Right.
Dare I say legendary.
Legendary.
Exactly.
Legend, wait for it. Dairy.
Exactly. Yeah. No, dairy makes me gassy. That's
to be fair.
Oh, he held it in. All right. Well done.
I'm a trained professional.
So in the middle of the summer when things get slow, Michael, this becomes a game to see if we can go ahead and get Lewanika to spew all over his microphone. It's not a game we play often, but it is a game that I play very well.
It's an expensive game these days.
I was just saying, we just got his microphone dialed in. I don't want to fuss with that.
But this one will run me a couple bills.
Yeah. So, all right. So skill challenges. So what else have we left? Have we left anything on the table here?
I think we've done a
we've covered.
We've
had
how to get into
my
how to run them.
Yeah. The one thing I had as an addendum or note, or 2 things I had actually.
Yeah, I was just saying we have 13 more minutes. How about it?
Did you just turn me loose on the clock?
Yeah.
On the clock? Joshua Newton. You have failed this city. And now I'm on the clock. All right. So, in all seriousness, one scenario that we didn't specifically mention, though it's very similar to what you would see in that courtroom trial scenario we talked about before, is negotiations. There has been a lot of hand-wringing and conversations about negotiating with the king, negotiating with the dragon, or whatever. The bard can't just go up and roll a single skill and get the dragon to give up their hoard, right? Or do the whatever. However, a skill challenge when you walk into the king and you're trying to convince the king to, do X to avoid a revolution, let's say, a skill challenge might be in order.
That's
that would be an interesting way to handle that. Similarly, if you are a halfling and a crew of dwarves trying to reclaim their home and there's a dragon living there, you're not going to get the dragon to give up that home, but maybe you get that dragon to give some largesse or something like that, because we're not beating him today. We don't have an archer in the human village below that's actually going to make the one shot that can't be done in game, but at least it can be done if you're writing a book. So we might have to find a different way to deal with this dragon. So I think a skill challenge might work in that scenario as well. So
never used it for negotiation. I'm gonna work on that. That's interesting.
That's actually pretty hot, because so what I like about that is that you nailed it with like the like I'm a bard. I'm going to roll my charisma check. I'm going to seduce the king to go ahead and turn over his kingdom to me. Oh, I rolled a natural 20. That means I automatically success, and it's a critical success. I guess that means it succeeds. What a skill challenge in that situation does is it dilutes the field of success, right? So it's like that 120 that the bard might roll contributes to the success, and the king is now maybe amused by him, but he's still not going to go ahead and there's still more to fall to accomplish that. And that would probably be one of those checks to be like, you got to get like 20 successes before you have 3 or failures or whatever like that, like before the king just gets bored and throws you in jail or whatever. It's like that, but that's what the framework of a skill challenge in that situation does. That's a really intriguing one, Lewanika. I had not thought about
that.
I don't think it would work specific. I was gonna say, and in that specific scenario, I think the answer is, as a GM, the king never gives up the kingdom.
Sure.
But maybe the win isn't the win that they get, isn't the win they thought they were gonna get. They don't get the kingdom, but they are now given control of the worst district, and they are now responsible for cleaning up that district for the king. You want this thing? Prove you're good enough. Fix District 9. Go in there, clear out the Vulcan who's chopping heads off. I'm mixing in Picard season 1, right? Okay. But my point is, go and clear out the worst district of all the worst big bads and all the things that I don't want to deal with. I'm not putting my resources. By the way, you don't get my resources. You do it with yours, and come back in a year's time, and then we'll have this negotiation again. I think that has a lot of power.
It's got some potential.
We talked last week about letting the players choose their course. They won. They're given that. Now, do they accept it or not? That's a player choice, no dice. They choose to take it. Now you know where your campaign's going. If they choose to walk away from it, now the king never has to negotiate with them again. He gave them their shot. They turned it down. Now it's a whole different kind of campaign.
Yeah. In my head,
that has a lot of power.
The visualization I'm seeing is almost like a tug of war where you start in the middle. On this side is the king gives you his crown. On this side, the king executes you.
Yeah.
And as you're doing, it's like, okay, you're moving closer this way. You're not going to get there, but you're moving closer that way. Oh, nope. Now you're moving closer this way.
Yeah.
And it could be like, oh, nope. Well, you're going to get thrown in jail, or you've insulted the king. So again, I don't know the skill challenge works. I think a modified version, but in my head, the visualization is more like a tug of war where you're moving one side or the other. You're never going to get to either extreme. He's not going to execute you, or they're not going to execute you. You're not going to get the crown. But you could end this negotiation on the positive side or on the negative side. And then again, I might have to figure out, okay, what is 1/3 of the way this way? What is 1/3 of the way this way? And kind of feel out, okay, you've ran out of chances. You're on this side. You're being thrown out on your dumpster, never to bother us again, type of a thing. I don't know.
So there is a way to manage player to NPC relationship scale with kind of prolonged skill challenges, right? So I'm thinking, let me think through this here for a second. So I'm thinking about like in Mass Effect, right? Or in other video games put out by Valve, right? Where it's like you as a player have a in Mass Effect, it's called the Paragon to Renegade scale. It's like as you do good things in the world, you increase your Paragon score. And if you all of a sudden start doing really bad things, your Paragon score goes down to 0, and then your Renegade score begins going up. And it's kind of the same thing you can do the same thing with like interpersonal relationships. So we've talked about this before many moons ago about how like if you have a major NPC and your party or you as a player or your character individually doesn't treat them right, they will not then treat you right. Like they like if they're your patron, right, for example, and you never complete missions and you're rude to them, they're going to stop giving you missions and giving you gold and giving you all the benefits to the point that they're not going to be your patron anymore, kind of thing, And I can see how skills, kind of like prolonged skills challenge. And by prolonged, I mean like you may roll on the skill on this skill challenge once a game, once a session, and for the next 10 sessions, you know, kind of see how that flows out for you individually, sort of thing. I'm not sure if that makes any sense at all, but I'm kind of seeing how you could go ahead and do something.
I think Baldur's Gate 3 kind of does the same thing with like you have, if you're trying to like romance people, but I can almost see like that's almost like the campaign is a skill challenge. And like each level, did you do the thing you were supposed to do? That notches you one side this way or that way. Again, it's not perfect, but there's something there. I'm going to cipher on that a little bit.
We're going to have to talk about that and kibitz and see how that works out at various.
That might be a good tabletop cafe topic for us just to be at, like shoot the S for a little bit.
Have at it, and for
the
that,
campaign's a skill challenge, man.
The entire campaign. What if the entire campaign?
Are we back at the center
skill
of the
challenge, man?
Right, exactly. Can't talk about it. You know,
Reggie,
my love to Brian on that one. And by the way, we're gonna have to get a screenshot of that so we can send that to Brian. Yeah. I think there's just a lot of interesting things that you can do with skill challenges and find neat ways to build that in.
They're so fun.
They're awesome. The last thing I will say is make your critical successes and critical failures really count. Just don't make it a single thing. Like if I could give one single piece of advice other than use them, I don't care how you homebrew them. I don't care what scenarios you use them.
Clearly, there's some options
specifically. There are a lot of options. There are lots of different ways, and there are ways that I've never even heard of or thought of yet. So do that. Do all of that. But make the big moments really count. That critical failure needs to have an impact, some lasting thing. In some cases, beyond the actual skill challenge and scene, and in other cases more. But if you want your players to really, if you're doing a skill challenge, at some point in your campaign, I don't care if you've been campaigning for 6 months and now you're doing your very first one. But if you want the very next one, if you want the players to sit up in their seats, get to the edge of their seats and really dig in the second time, make sure any critical success or any critical failure has a lasting impact beyond that scene. And I can guarantee you the next time they're in a skill challenge, they're 100. If they were in at 80, 90, or even 100%, you do that in that very first one, I can guarantee you they are in 203% every time from that point forward.
So give me an example. So how would you, within the framework of the skill challenge, make critical successes and failures more important?
So in a courtroom scenario I did with my party where they were on the witness stand, a critical failure was made by one of the players. And what happened in that, other than just a failure in that scenario, and that was very close to a traditional skill challenge, by the way.
7-3 or whatever,
that particular city had a council of elders. The council of elders were the jury. They were the ones deciding. They had to convince this council. But with that critical success, I had him roll a D, I think it was a D8 or whatever the D was for the number of counselors in that council. The number they rolled was the number of councils that now marked that individual as an enemy from that day forward. They literally dealt with, in the case of the good people who marked him as an enemy, bad treatment, higher prices. He didn't get help when he was the one going to ask for help for the rest of the time they were in that city. For the bad ones, he dealt with people trying to pickpocket him. For those, but for the evil ones, he dealt with assassination attempts every now and then. I didn't make it like you got attacked every single time, but it did become known within a very short order that there was a price on his head. It wasn't necessarily for death, but it was for cause him harm and make his life difficult. And that was really because of that failure.
Okay.
And that's how I did it in that scenario. That was a reasonably corrupt city to begin with, so it really fit the motif. Your mileage may vary depending on the type of scene and scenario you're in, but that's how I did one. And I made that critical failure really, really count.
Yeah, I think that kind of makes me think of like 13th Age. I think both of you are somewhat familiar with that.
Yes.
Where like the same things could happen anyway, but you flavor them differently. Yep. Like if this person has a conflicted relationship with the emperor or the undead person or whatever. Like, yeah, we're gonna have a combat here because I just think it's fun to have a combat. But these people all worked for the emperor. And because you have this bad relationship, that's why these people were after you, even though metagame was just because I wanted a combat because it'd be fun to fight some assassins.
Sure.
So, finding a way to like flavor things and give them more importance of, oh, you screwed this up really bad. That's why these particular people were after you. It wasn't a random encounter. It was a target assassination because of this, that, or the other. I think that's ultimately, it may not have actually like meta currency or meta level. It may not have made any difference, but it's going to feel different because you're flavoring it based off these other roles. I think that's a really cool way of handling that.
Yep. And that links us to the episode that we just aired last week, I believe it was, where we talked about plot seeds. So that thing happened in the skill challenge, and that became a campaign seed. So later on, like you did with the green eyes or the missing finger or the tattoo or whatever, you were going to do those things anyway. They were already written in the campaign, but just by flavoring it differently, that player realized that what I did in episode 3 matters now that we're in episode 9. Yeah. And that's how you get people to keep coming back to the table.
Yep.
I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah. Well, what a fabulous, interesting discussion. See, now we have filled up our time. Isn't this fantastic?
Yes.
As Lewanika alluded to earlier, the next Class Warfare Monk comes up next week. So that's going to be a good time. Some very interesting things that happened in that class
on the way to the mountain.
On the way to the mountain. So some very interesting things. So it'll be a good time. But thank you, gentlemen. As always, appreciate the time. Michael, we didn't even get a chance to talk about the fact you just got back from Origins.
Got back. It was a great time. Had some good highs. Had one of my best con games I've ever got to play in. Had an absolute wonderful time. Had a couple that were lessons learned that where you could be like, don't do that. And, good fodder for conversation. I don't know if we have a chance to break it down. If not, Tabletop, which we're supposed to do Tabletop Cafe tomorrow. I have a medical thing happening, so I'm going to have to cancel. But whenever we get around to next Tabletop Cafe, we're going to do a debrief of Chris's Dragonlance campaign. After that, I'd like to do an Origins recap if we don't do one on the main run.
Yeah, I love it. That sounds fantastic.
At some point in time, we will debrief. And I got Gen Con coming up in like a month.
I love it. Fantastic. That's crazy to me. That's
a month and a half, maybe. I don't know. It seems like it's really close. Yeah.
So.
And I've got Open Game Con in July, third week of July. I've got that coming up. So I'll have one that I'm going to as well.
Yeah, well, I am on vacation next week, so I'm going to be in Quebec. So don't
Quebec.
I'll be in Quebec. Yes, exactly. I'm dusting off my bad Quebecois French. So that's
excellent.
Yeah.
Shorts, black socks, and sandals.
Exactly. Yeah.
When in Rome, I'm sorry.
Quand on Quebec. All right, gentlemen.
What am I doing? What am I doing?
C is actually a French. So C is a French word. It's a very specific form of we. Actually, it's if you say the negative of something and I'm correcting you, and I say, if you say, should I not do that? Say yes, you should do that. That's C instead of we. Anyway, that's. You need the French.
And we learn things.
I know, right? Exactly. Yeah. So
wrap it up, John.
This is what happens when it's 105. My brain gets a little crazy. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for listening. We want to hear your comments down below, of course. How do you use skill challenges? What are the mechanics that you use? We tossed out a bunch of variations in this show today. Some interesting things that 24 hours before a game I'm going to be running. I'm now thinking how I'm going to go ahead and run it. So this is a good time. So how do you run it? How do you bring them in? What kind of scenarios have you used skill challenges for? How have they worked? How have they not worked? We'd love to go ahead and hear the comments down below. So please make sure you're dropping down there. Join the conversation. We'd love to go ahead and hear it. So, all right. That's our show for tonight. Thank you again, gentlemen. Appreciate it as always. And we'll see you next week with Class Warfare Monk run by Mr. Lewanika Miller. So until then, have a good week.